As a Master of Science Information Systems candidate, we need to move just beyond using technology to critically understand the theories that govern creation, implementation, and impact. So research in IS is not simply about collecting data, it's about choosing the right philosophical lens through which to view a complex socio-technical world. The chapter I have put down breaks down the foundational triangle, the socio-technical theories, and the methodological application. So we'll start with the foundational triangle, which will deal with ontology, epistemology, and paradigms. All research begins with assumptions about reality and knowledge. So think of these concepts as the unseen rules that define your entire research project. Then we look at the duality of reality under ontology. Ontology asks the fundamental question: what is the nature of reality? What is the nature of reality I'm studying? In the IS, this usually boils down to whether a system or social structure is fixed or fluid. So under ontology, you need to remember these two concepts, objectivism and subjectivism. So objectivism, which deals with reality, realism, this stance holds that reality is external, independent and fixed. It exists whether we perceive it or not. So for example, a hotel, the hotel and its building and structure will remain the same even when visitors, when guests check in and check out. Another example is an ERP system's database structure or its lines of code are objective facts. If you believe the system's performance metrics are objective and measurable, you lean towards objectivism. And then subjectivism, this is about constructionism. This stance argues that reality is socially constructed. It's fluid and depends on human minds, language, and culture. The meaning of the ERP system is what the users negotiate it to be. If one sees the ERP as a tool for efficiency, another sees it as a managerial surveillance. Both realities are true based on their context. So that's the duality reality, the duality principles of ontology. Ontology, we said, it is about what the nature of reality that you are studying. Okay, it answers the what. And then the next path to knowledge is epistemology, which deals with the how can I acquire the valid knowledge of that reality. So it needs to align with the ontological view. So under epistemology, when you're answering the how, there are 2 points to note. Empiricism, which is a form of positivism, and interpretism, which is aligned to subjectivism. So when you're gathering empirical evidence, you are being objective. And then when you're gathering interpretive kind of information, you'll be a bit more subjective. So empiricism, this approach believes knowledge is gained through measurement, observation, verification of facts. The goal is to identify universal laws through measurement, observation, verification of facts. So these laws you have to do deductive. The other one is inducive. Okay. You must immerse yourself into the context to grasp the subjective contextual meaning using inductive reasoning. You're building a theory from data. Okay. So this is like theory to data. The other one is data to theory. Okay. So we need to take note here that we're saying this is data to theory, and then this one is theory to data. So that's the epistemology and what it attempts to answer. The how question. Okay, and the last one, the paradigms. Okay, what are paradigms? These are coherent worldviews. So a research paradigm is a cohesive package linking ontological and epistemological assumptions. Positivism assumes the IS world is like the natural world. Orderly, it's measurable and predictable. Okay, research seeks to establish causal relationships, e.g. measuring the correlation between IT spending and profitability. And then interpretivism assumes the IS world is socially created and culturally dependent. Research focuses on rich contextual explanations of users' behavior and systems meanings. It explores the impact of organizational culture on system adoption. Another paradigm, which is the critical realism. This is a sophisticated position with stratified ontology. It seeks to explain observable events by identifying the underlying and observable causal mechanisms. For example, to study gender bias in an AI recruitment system, critical realism would argue that the bias, which is the observable effect, is caused by real mechanism of historical social inequality embedded in the training data and algorithmic design. Knowledge is gained through retroduction, that is moving from observed effects back to the necessary causes. And then another one is the critical theory, which focuses on critique. It's critique and transformation. Research aims to expose the hidden power of constructs, conflict, ideological bias, technological systems, e.g. when it comes to analyzing how IT governance frameworks reinforce managerial control. So the goal is to provoke emancipation of positive social change. Okay. Then we can look at, this was the third one, the socio-technical theories and concepts. So what are some of the socio-technical terms and theories? So once you have your philosophical lens, once you choose which lens you want to use, whether you want to use the ontology, you've answered your epistemology, and you have your paradigm, your research paradigm, whether you're going to use positivism, interpretivism, critical realism, or critical theory. You need a theoretical vocabulary. Information systems theories provide models to explain, predict, or critique specific phenomena. So predictive theories, these are positivist tools. These theories are typically used in qualitative research to predict user behavior. Unified theory of acceptance and use of technology. This is a cornerstone theory that predicts a user's intention to use technology based on four main constructs. Okay, I can maybe summarize this into a picture of how this works. Yeah, so this is what is being discussed here. I'll just dump it here. Okay. All right, so what we're saying is the UTA-UT, some of the predictors, the main constructs is performance expectancy, the belief that using the system will improve the job performance, the effort expectancy, the belief that using the system is easy, and then social influence, belief that important others, e.g. the boss, think you should use the system, and then the facilitating conditions, the belief that the necessary infrastructure and support are available. So these are the four: performance expectancy, effort expectancy, social influence, and then facilitating conditions. So what this means is that you have the performance expectancy, the effort expectancy, the social influence, facilitating conditions, all do have a direct effect on the behavioral intentions, and they affect the use of the system. And the facilitating conditions also directly would affect the use behavior, which is the belief that the system, that the necessary infrastructure and support are available. Other issues that are there are to do with maybe gender, age, experience, and maybe they volunteer to use the system. Then another theory, which is the diffusion. So another predictive theory that one can use under positivist tools is the diffusion of innovation theory. This explains how and why innovations are spread through the social system. The speed of adoption is determined by the perceived characteristics of innovation, such as relative advantage, compatibility. Okay. So this is what will influence the adoption. Then the other theory is the technology organization environment framework. This framework guides research on the firm level adoption decisions, e.g. cloud computing or ERP. It stipulates that the adoption is driven by factors within technology context, organizational context, and environmental context. So for technology context, we're talking about available internal and external technology. From the organizational context, it's the size of the organization, the resources available, and the structure, which is the operating model. And then for environmental context, looking at these are external factors, government regulations, the competition, and so on. Okay. Another one is the processual and conflict theories. These are interpretive, these are critical tools. These theories are used to explain how complex social change occurs and how conflict manifests. So the examples are saturation theory. This is a powerful theory for process research. it posits the duality of structure, meaning the rules and resources embedded in the system, e.g. a blueprint, are both constraining medium and the outcome of human action, e.g. an employee's daily workaround. Structuration theory is excellent for explaining the unintended consequences and adaptations that happen long after the system is implemented. Example is an organization implements rigid new EA framework structure. Employees develop effective workarounds. Over time, management realizes the rigid framework is impractical and officially modifies it based on workaround. Structure is reproduced, transformed by agency. And the other one is actor network theory. This theory is unique because it treats non-human elements, the technology, the code, and the documents as actors with equal agency to human actors. Actor network theory is used to trace social material process of IT implementation through translation, the process of enrolling diverse human and non-human interests into a tangible project. A project fails when the network of actors collapses. The code stops working, a key manager leaves, or a user manual is rejected. Okay. So actor network theory, very important. And then we have hermeneutics as an epistemological method. So it guides interpretation. The hermeneutic cycle describes the interpretive process. Understanding a specific data point requires relating it to the overall context of the study and vice versa. This iterative process prevents misinterpretation and builds contextual depth. Okay. Then methodological application. Let's look at the methodological applications. Very important that you choose the right methodology when you're doing your research. So your research work needs to be grounded on sound methodologies and that your findings are credible. So there are different types of methodologies that one can use. First one is the survey or research, which is positivism. So it will support positivism, and you collect quantitative data, numerical data there that you'll be able to count. The type of research objective: test UTA/UT on a large population to predict system usage. Okay. And then another methodology is in-depth case study, which seeks to address the interpretivism or critical research. Critical review, and then critical reality, and then this one is qualitative. It's text-based and narrative. It seeks to explain the process of structuration within single critical organization. And then another methodology is ethnography. It's interpretivism, qualitative also, understanding the lived experience and cultural practices related to technology. Okay, this is ethnography. And then the last one is design science research, which is pragmatism. Mixed, it could be mixed methods. This one, you create, build, and evaluate an artifact, e.g. a new data model to solve a recognized business problem. So we've mentioned pragmatism and mixed methods. Pragmatism is a philosophical stance that says use whatever method works best to solve the problem. Okay? Use whatever method that works to solve a problem. Need to be pragmatic. It is a justification for mixed method research. Okay? So this is where we justify mixed methods. Mixed methods, we're saying, is an approach that integrates both quantitative and qualitative data to gain comprehensive understanding. Okay, so for sequential explanatory, you are moving from quantitative to qualitative. You start with quantitative data, e.g. to identify the breadth of a problem. For example, a survey shows 40% user resistance. Then follow up with qualitative interviews to explain why resistance exists, okay? And then also you can start with qualitative to quantitative, the other way. So you start with qualitative data to explore an unknown phenomenon and build conceptual model. Then use qualitative methods to test the model's generalizability in a larger population. Okay. Then also we need to ensure that there is rigor and that you're able to do generalization. So rigor in positivism, this is achieved through internal and external validity, statistical controls, representative sampling. The goal is statistical generalization, generalizing from the sample to the population. And then rigor in interpretivism is achieved through credibility, trustworthiness, and dependability. Key techniques include triangulation. This is using multiple data sources as evidence. Interviews, such as interviews, observation, documents to confirm your findings. Then thick description, providing highly detailed contextual descriptions that allow the reader to judge transferability or analytical generalization, generalizing the theory to similar context. Then we can also talk about the problem statement gap. So always ensure that your problem statement identifies a genuine knowledge gap. So there has to be a genuine knowledge gap. For example, saying nobody has studied X in Zambia is weak. Saying, well, UT predicts high intention to use X, it fails to explain the process of post-adoption resistance in Zambian mining context. Creating a processual knowledge gap is strong. Okay. So we need to know how the problem statement is crafted. All right. Okay. So let's move to research methodologies and philosophical alignment. For now, we'll take a short break and then we'll come back and continue to look at research methodology, what it is, the types of methodologies, a recap of basically what we just covered earlier on. Yeah. Okay, so we can continue with research methodologies and philosophical alignment. The research methodology is the overall strategy that connects the theoretical assumptions, which is the philosophy, to the collection and analysis of data. So we are moving from theories to collecting data and analyzing it, and the methods that we use. So we have the positivist methodologies, which will focus on the quantitative, and we also have the interpretive methodologies, which will focus on qualitative data. So for the methodology that you use for collecting quantitative data, you have surveys. We already says it's positivism in nature because it deals with the what and how much. Like we use to test the relationships between variables in a large population, e.g. what factors influence cloud adoption among 200 SMEs. The key techniques, these will be like, it will be in form of structured questionnaires. You can do random sampling, there will be statistical analysis, regression testing, factor analysis. So this is a suitable, it's excellent for testing established positivist theories like UTA, or Diffusion of Innovation Theory on a wide scale. Okay. Yes. So the next one is laboratory experiment, which is positivism. So an example of a question that you may ask is, does X cause Y? So this is used to establish causal relationships by manipulating independent variables and controlling the environment. Does the new UI design lead to fewer errors? So you have to have like a control group, treatment, and then groups are randomized, then statistical significance testing. So this is ideal for early design science, research, evaluation, or human-computer interaction studies. Okay, for qualitative focus, the methodology that you are looking at is, for example, the case study. Case studies would be interpretivism in nature, critical realism, or pragmatism. Research question: how and why in-depth examinations of one or a few contemporary phenomena in their real-life context. E.g., how did structural conflict lead to the failure of ERP implementation in one organization? So doing a case study. And then some of the key techniques, case studies could be semi-structured interviews, it can be in form of observation, document analysis, triangulation, using multiple data sources. So it's very versatile. It can be positivist, where you're testing a hypothesis in one case, or interpretivist, where you're building one theory from a case. Another form of methodology is ethnography, interpretivism, phenomenology. What is the lived experience? So you're entering into the subject's natural environment to gain first-hand understanding of their culture, practices, and meaning making. E.g., what are the daily work practices of a remote data analyst? Okay. And then the key techniques: prolonged non-participant observation, field notes, reflective journaling, and structured interviews. So it's essential for applying theories like structuration theory or actors network theory, which require tracing social processes and practices over time. Action research, this could be interpretivism or pragmatism. How can we solve this problem collaboratively? The researcher actively intervenes in real-world organizational problem and studies the effects of the intervention. Okay. Cyclical process, diagnose, plan, take action, and evaluate. Okay, which will be like a circle. You start with the diagnosis, then you plan, then you take action and evaluate. Joint researcher practitioner effort. Those are some of the key techniques, and then it's excellent for practical IT management problems, where the goal is both knowledge creation and organizational change. This is action research. Another one is ethnography. I don't know if you've come across this one. So ethnography, it is a form of qualitative research that seeks to understand the cultural experiences that encompass and are reflected within the traces, practices of networks of systems. So ethnography and ethnography. Ethnography was developed from ethnography, and it's applied in online settings. It is more than the application of qualitative research in form of traditional ethnographic techniques in an online context. Okay. Then we have these critical methodologies. These methodologies aim to critique power structures, review hidden assumptions, and drive social change. The critical research, the critical theory, critical realism, some of the questions types, whose interests are being observed, research aimed at exposing domination, inequality, and power imbalances in the use of technology. How does the design of the new HR system reinforce management control over workers? So in critical research, it's a critical discourse analysis, participatory action research, dialectical analysis, that is looking for contradictions. Then it's necessary when problems statements suggest issues of equity, power, or emancipation. For example, algorithmic bias or digital divide, IT governance issues. There are other special methodologies that we need to use. The design science research and the mixed methods research. So the design science research, the primary goal is where you're building an artifact and then evaluate it, aims to solve the practical problems. Pragmatism, what works, and functionalism, that's building a purpose. The key differentiator is that the output is an artifact, like a new method for cybersecurity, not just theory. It follows iterative cycles, e.g. relevance and rigor. So for mixed methods, primary goal is to integrate qualitative and quantitative data to gain a comprehensive understanding of the complex problem. Pragmatism, using the best tool available. Designs are sequential. It says you are moving from quantitative to qualitative, and from qualitative to quantitative. Okay. It provides the strongest form of evidence for the complex IS phenomenon. Okay, that's much of the theory. We should now go and look at the question. We can focus on the past papers, starting with the paper from it was a full paper test of 2023. Okay, yeah, so this paper, I think we were supposed to, generally these exams, this was a continuation assessment test, which we were supposed to write, an example which we didn't write, but we'll go through it anyhow. So we are being given three abstracts to compare. So the idea would be that we need to compare three abstracts, and then based on the comparison that we do, we need to choose which one is the best and which one is the worst, and giving reasons for our choices. So abstract number 1 is about integrating software engineering theory and practice using the essence of using essence. It's a case study. Okay, so this study investigates the application of essence, which is a formal kernel and language for software engineering methods to improve project predictability and management. Using an organizational action research methodology, we applied Essence's activity and competence breakdown across 3 large projects. The objective findings show a 21% increase in average team and productivity and a 58% decrease in documented defects over an 18-month period. That's demonstrating the pragmatic value of formalizing software engineering practice. So software engineering, really what the abstract was saying is that software engineering is a complex and success depends on many interrelated factors. Theory-based software engineering is about providing a practical way for software teams to understand the relationship and the influence of these factors to thereby adapt the way they work. This paper proposes an approach to theory-based software engineering on Essence, which is a software engineering kernel distilled by SEMAT, Software Engineering Method and Theory Initiative. Essence supports theory-based software engineering factors by providing a domain model that is useful for organizing relating software engineering. We provide a step-by-step application of our approach and industrial software process improvement. Okay, so basically these are the case studies that we have. I think I just need to bring them back here. Yeah, so okay, we'll include these a bit later. Yeah. Okay. Then we have another paper that focuses on the challenge of generating theoretical support for software development. We outlined a model of coat hanger for theorizing about development practices. Ideally, when you compare these theories, 1 and 3 are positivist or design science, because there's something that is being created. And then 2 is interpretivism. It's focusing on the challenging theoretical assumptions and human agency. So the best one is number 2. This paper is meta-theoretical critique, directly engaging with the philosophical assumptions, challenging technical rationality that govern the field. It addresses the fundamental theoretical gap, the lack of structured theorizing for human-centric practices, making its contribution highly relevant to a research philosophy course. Okay, and then abstract 1 was in the middle, abstract 3 was the West. The reason is that the focus on physical architecture and optimizing productive line flow is heavily biased towards industrial engineering. While methodologically sound, its core contribution is less central to the socio-technical organization philosophy of information systems compared to the other two. You need to describe a reasonable problem statement with or without references that may be derived from one of the abstract. Okay, so the abstract we'll look at is number 2. The problem statement is that the prevailing IS research on software development often adopts a technical rationality that obscures the critical role of human expertise, contextual knowledge, and the developer's reflection in action during software development lifecycle. This theoretical deficiency prevents us from adequately understanding how and why specific global software practices are adopted, adapted, or ultimately resisted by practitioners. Consequently, prescriptive methodologies frequently fail to yield expected results in unique, resource-constrained emerging economies like Zambia. A knowledge gap exists in the structured theorizing of human practices. Therefore, new conceptual framework is needed to bridge this divide between abstract universal theory and situated local practice, thus supporting sustainable software industry growth in emerging markets. Describe 2 research questions that might come. One is, what statistically significant relationship is there between intensity of adherence to prescribed agile practices and the measured team productivity, e.g. feature completion rate within Zambian software development firms? Another question 2 is, does formal training in the Court-Hanger model statistically moderate the relationship between the use of specific software practices and the reduction in post-release defects in Zambian software projects? Then you also have interpretive stance or research questions. How do Zambian software practitioners perceive and negotiate the tension between intended technical rationality of global methodologies and their own reflection in action when developing local solution? Another one is, what are the lived experiences and socially constructed meanings of successful practice among senior developers, and how do these interpretations influence the adoption of global methodologies? Okay, so this one is the one that deals with ethno ethnography. It's qualitative. And then critical stance questions. How do globalized commercialized software development practices reinforce a challenge existing organizational power structures and labor hierarchies within the large Zambian tech firms? To what extent does the prevailing emphasis on technical rationality in local software development lifecycle process mask underlying issues of resource inequity and management dominance, thereby inhibiting true emancipatory change for junior developers? So for critical stance, just know that there is the issues of technical rationality, and then for the other one, we're talking about lived experiences and perceived use perceptions. Okay, so the other one, we're actually counting the actual numbers to be quantitative and positivist stance. And then the other one, this other question is just asking you to describe two objectives that might be derived from the research questions. Okay, describe two objectives that might be derived from the research questions. And then also suggest how you would incorporate a research methodology for conditions in question 4. How do you incorporate a research methodology? And then suggest a theory and a means of applying the theory in a selected context. What theory are we looking at? And then we'll briefly explain the concept of generalization of findings in the context of question 3. And then lastly, discuss the concept of subjectivity and objectivity. In the context of question 3. Okay, so suggest how you would incorporate a research methodology. We're saying that the optimal choice is a mixed methods research design, which is justified by pragmatism, specifically the explanatory sequential mixed methods, where collecting quantitative to qualitative approach. So I would start with a large quantitative survey as phase 1 to test the positivist objective, e.g. measuring correlation between practice adherence and productivity. Okay, once I'm done, then I would use purposive sampling to select key respondents or outliers or unexpected results from phase 1 for quantitative in-depth interviews. This allows the rich qualitative data to explain and contextualize the initial statistical findings, providing a complete socio-technical answer. And then the next question is, can you suggest a theory and a means of applying the theory? Okay, so the theory that we have selected is the Structuration Theory by Anthony Giddens. And then the means of applying this theory, we're saying, is that this Structuration Theory is ideal for studying socio-technical gap. The research would analyze the duality of structure by observing how the formal practices are used and resisted by developers, and how those repeated situated actions are subsequently reproduced to transform the formal organizational rules and resource allocation over time. This requires longitudinal interpretive case study focused on recursive relationship between practical and rule. And then second last question is briefly explain the concept of generalization or findings in the. So generalization is fundamentally dependent on the chosen philosophical stance. So you can have statistical generalization for positivist research questions, generalizing findings from statistically representative sample to a larger population, e.g. inferring a specific productivity rate for all Zambian firms. This relies on random sampling and statistical confidence to ensure external validity. Okay. And then theoretical analytical generalization. Generalizing the theory of conceptual model developed from the deep case study to other settings that have similar theoretical features. So it's generalizing the theory of resistance to other resource-constrained IT teams. This relies on thick description for transferability, not statistics. And then you also have contextual or substantive generalization. It's generalizing the critique of explanatory mechanisms and aligning power dynamics uncovered in one specific context to other contexts where similar structural forces are presumed to be at play. The last question is we need to discuss the concept of subjectivity and objectivity in context to question 3, based on the research questions that we had discussed earlier on, or the problem statement. So objectivity assumes an objective reality that exists externally to the researcher. Okay, so in a being object, it assumes the objective reality that exists externally to the researcher. E.g., a defect count is fixed metric. The researcher strives for objectivity by remaining detached, using standardized instruments and ensuring findings are replicable. That's seeking universal laws. And then subjectivity, which is interpretive, focuses on assumptions, assumes a subjective reality that is socially constructed and experienced uniquely by individuals. E.g., the meaning of productivity is negotiated. The researcher embraces subjectivity as necessary to gain rich knowledge and focus on interpreting the respondent's unique frame of reference. I think that's all for the first part of the paper. We'll look at the next paper, which will be the December 2023, and then we'll look at the 2024 one. Yeah, then we'll be wrapping up from there. So I'll take a break before we come back to wind up on the December 2023 questions and answers. Okay, so we've done with the first part of the test. We wanted to go and look at the exam questions now. But before we go into the exam questions, kindly give me a like, follow, and like the YouTube channel so that I can continue giving you such in a small way. That's what I'm asking you to do. If you have any questions, feel free to drop it in the comment section on the YouTube channel. For part 2 of the exam questions, please do watch the next series where we'll be going into details to look at the actual exam questions. For now, I wanted to lay the background and provide some information around some of the key concepts that we expect to see in the exam. Don't forget to like and share. Thank you.